Lena was beyond excited to marry the love of her life, David. They had been together for several years, and she was 6 months pregnant with their first child. The wedding day arrived, and Lena was beaming as she walked down the aisle. David looked at her with love in his eyes, and she knew that they were meant to be together forever. But as they exchanged vows, David's demeanor changed. His eyes darkened, and his voice became cold. Lena felt a knot form in her stomach, and she could tell that something was wrong. After the ceremony, David pulled her aside and told her the unthinkable. "I'm going to another woman," he announced, without any remorse or hesitation. Lena was shocked and heartbroken. She had just married the man she loved, and now he was telling her that he had been unfaithful. She couldn't believe that he would do something so cruel and callous, especially on their wedding day. David left Lena standing there, alone and pregnant, without any explanation or apology. Lena was shattered, but she refused to let David get the best of her. She decided to take matters into her own hands and do something that would make him regret what he had done. With the help of her family and friends, Lena planned a revenge that would not only teach David a lesson, but also bring awareness to the issue of domestic abuse. She started a campaign on social media, sharing her story and encouraging other women to speak up about their experiences. The campaign quickly gained momentum, and soon Lena was being featured in news outlets and radio shows. She was becoming a voice for women who had been abused and neglected by their partners, and her message was resonating with people all over the world. Meanwhile, David watched from afar, his reputation tarnished and his life in shambles. He realized that his actions had consequences and that he had hurt the woman he loved beyond repair. But it was too late for apologies, and Lena had moved on to a new chapter in her life. Years later, Lena looked back on that fateful day with a sense of pride and empowerment. She had turned her pain into purpose and had shown the world that women are strong, resilient, and capable of overcoming even the toughest obstacles. David, on the other hand, was left to live with the regret of losing the love of his life and the shame of his actions. Despite the anger and hurt that filled her heart, the bride decided to go through with the wedding. She refused to let her fiancé's betrayal ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She walked down the aisle with a smile on her face and tried her best to ignore the whispers and stares of the guests. As the ceremony went on, the bride could feel her emotions bubbling to the surface. She struggled to keep her composure and hold back her tears, but when it was time to exchange vows, she couldn't help but speak her truth. "John, you said that you were going to another woman, but I want you to know that I forgive you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I forgive you because I love you, and I believe that we can work through this together." The groom looked visibly surprised and moved by his bride's words. He had expected her to be angry and resentful, not forgiving and loving. He realized that he had made a terrible mistake and that he needed to make things right. After the wedding, the couple went on their honeymoon, but the bride had a surprise for her groom. She had booked them a couples therapy session, and John reluctantly agreed to attend. During the session, the couple talked about their relationship and what had led John to cheat. They delved into their past and their hopes for the future, and slowly but surely, they began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered by John's infidelity. Months passed, and the couple continued to work on their relationship. They went to therapy regularly, and John made sure to show his love and appreciation for his wife every day. Eventually, the bride gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and the couple felt like they had truly overcome their struggles. Years later, as they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, the couple looked back on their journey with gratitude and pride. They knew that their love had been tested, that they had come out stronger and more committed than ever before. And they knew that no matter what life threw their way, they would face it together as a team. Maria took a deep breath and entered the wedding venue. She could hear the buzz of conversation as guests milled around, admiring the decorations and sipping on champagne. She felt a lump form in her throat as she scanned the room, searching for Pedro. She spotted him near the bar, talking to one of his groomsmen. He looked so handsome in his suit, but Maria couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been gnawing at her all day. She made her way over to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can we talk?" Pedro looked at her, his brow furrowing. "Is everything okay?" Maria took a deep breath. "I overheard you on the phone yesterday," she said. "You said you were going to see another woman." Pedro's expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Please don't lie to me, Pedro. I heard you say it." Pedro's eyes narrowed. "You were eavesdropping on my phone calls." "I wasn't trying to," Maria said. "I just happened to hear you." Pedro shook his head. "I don't have time for this, Maria. I'm getting married today." Maria felt a surge of anger. "How can you do this to me?" she said. "I'm carrying your child." Pedro's face hardened. "That's not my problem," he said. "I told you from the beginning that I didn't want to have a baby right now." Maria felt her knees go weak. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Pedro took a step towards her. "I'm saying that I'm done, Maria. I'm done with this relationship. I'm going to see other women, and there's nothing you can do about it." Maria felt a sudden surge of rage. She couldn't believe that Pedro was so callous, so cruel. Without thinking, she reached out and slapped him across the face. The guests around them gasped in shock, and Pedro stumbled backwards, clutching his cheek. Maria felt a sense of satisfaction wash over her. She had stood up for herself, for her baby. But then she saw Pedro's expression change. His eyes narrowed, and he looked at her with a cold, calculating gaze. "You're going to regret that," he said quietly. Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never seen Pedro like this before. She realized that she had made a terrible mistake. Suddenly, Pedro lunged at her, grabbing her by the arms. Maria screamed as he dragged her towards the door. "Let me go," she cried, struggling to break free. But Pedro was too strong. He pushed her out of the door and onto the street, where she fell to the ground. "I never want to see you again," he spat, before slamming the door in her face. Maria lay on the ground, her heart pounding. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She had lost the man she loved, and she had no idea what she was going to do next. But she knew one thing for sure. She was going to fight for her baby. She was going to do whatever it took to give her child a better life than she had. With a determined look on her face, Maria picked herself up and walked away from the wedding venue. She had no idea what the future held, but she was ready to face it head-on. Olga went to the bathroom to calm down and take a deep breath. As she washed her face, she looked at herself in the mirror and made a decision. She was not going to let this man ruin her life or the life of her unborn child. She left the bathroom and went straight to her guests. Everyone was shocked to see her so composed after what had just happened. She took the microphone and announced that there was a change of plans. The wedding was not going to happen, but the celebration would go on. She thanked everyone for coming and asked them to enjoy the food, drinks, and music. The guests were confused and didn't know what to do, but Olga's confidence and determination inspired them. They started talking, laughing, and dancing. It was like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. They realized that they didn't need the groom to have a good time. They were there for Olga, and she was there for them. The groom was nowhere to be seen. Some guests tried to reach him by phone, but he didn't answer. Others assumed that he had left the venue in embarrassment. The rumors started to spread, and soon everyone knew that Olga had been left at the altar. But Olga didn't care. She was surrounded by her friends and family, and they were all having a great time. She even started dancing with some of the guests, showing off her moves and laughing out loud. As the night went on, Olga started feeling better and better. She realized that she didn't need a man to be happy. She had her own life, her own dreams, and her own child to take care of. She knew it was not going to be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. The guests noticed that Olga was glowing, and they started cheering for her. They knew that she had been through a tough time, but they also knew that she was strong enough to overcome it. The wedding that never happened became a party that everyone would remember. It was a celebration of life, love, and friendship, and Olga was the star of the show. The next day, Olga woke up feeling grateful for what had happened. She knew that it was a blessing in disguise. She had avoided a terrible mistake and had discovered her true strength. She was ready to face the future, no matter what it held. As for the groom, he never showed up again. He disappeared from Olga's life, leaving her with a broken heart and a shattered dream. But she didn't let him define her. She moved on, found love again, and built a happy family with her child. Years later, when Olga looked back at that night, she didn't feel anger or resentment. She felt proud of herself for standing up for herself and her child. She knew that she had made the right decision, and that gave her peace of mind. She was grateful for the lesson that life had taught her, and she was determined to make the most of it. Helen had been keeping up with the news, eagerly anticipating any updates on the escaped prisoner. She felt a sense of responsibility for having contributed to his escape, and so she watched with bated breath as the manhunt played out on television. But as the days wore on with no sign of the prisoner, Helen began to worry. What if he had been caught and was simply refusing to admit to his involvement in her escape? Or worse, what if he had fled the country? Helen knew that she couldn't live the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, constantly afraid of being caught. She had to find a way to clear her name and move on with her life. That's when she had an idea. She contacted a friend in law enforcement, someone she had met during her time in prison, and asked for his help. He agreed to meet with her, and they began working on a plan to catch the real culprit. They spent weeks investigating, gathering evidence, and following leads. It was slow going, and there were times when Helen felt like giving up. But her friend encouraged her to keep going, telling her that they were getting closer every day. Finally, they got a break. A witness had come forward with information about a man who had been seen near the prison on the night of Helen's escape. He had been wearing a disguise, but the witness was able to describe him in detail. With this information, Helen and her friend were able to track down the man. He was a petty criminal with a long record of burglaries and thefts, and he had been paid a large sum of money to help orchestrate Helen's escape. Helen was stunned. She had never even heard of this man before, and yet he had been the one to frame her for the crime. With the evidence in hand, Helen's friend was able to build a strong case against the man. He was arrested and eventually confessed to his role in the escape. With this confession, Helen was exonerated of all charges. It was a huge relief for Helen, but the experience had left her shaken. She had always believed in the justice system, but now she knew how easily it could be manipulated. In the end, Helen decided to leave the city and start a new life elsewhere. She wanted to put the past behind her and move on. But she never forgot the lessons she had learned, and she remained vigilant against the injustices of the world. The bride, now feeling betrayed and angry, immediately sprang into action. She spent the next few days furiously plotting her revenge. She started by calling up her fiancé's family members and friends, telling them what had happened and making sure they knew that the wedding was off. She also went to the press and shared her story, which quickly went viral. The groom, meanwhile, was desperately trying to get in touch with his bride, but she refused to speak to him. He tried calling her, emailing her, and even sending her flowers, but she remained stubbornly silent. Finally, after several days of this, the groom decided to go to the bride's apartment to try and talk to her in person. He knocked on the door, but there was no answer. After a few minutes of waiting, he decided to let himself in with the spare key he had. Inside, he found the bride sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by dozens of empty pizza boxes and bottles of wine. She looked up at him with wild eyes and a mischievous grin on her face. "Welcome to your new home," she said, gesturing around the room. The groom was confused at first, but then he saw the note she had left for him on the table. It read, "I hope you like pizza and wine, because that's all you're going to be eating for a while. I've canceled all of your credit cards and bank accounts, And I've also taken out a restraining order against you. If you come anywhere near me or our child, I'll have you arrested. Enjoy your new life as a single man." The groom was horrified by what he had just read. He begged the bride to reconsider, but she was adamant. She had been humiliated and betrayed, and she wanted revenge. Over the next few weeks, the groom found himself struggling to survive. He had no money, no job, and no place to live. He was forced to move in with his parents, who were deeply disappointed in him. He spent his days trying to figure out how to win back the bride's affection, but every attempt he made was met with silence. Eventually, he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. He had thrown away everything he had with the bride for a meaningless fling with another woman. He knew he would never be able to make it up to her, but he was determined to try. He spent the next few months working hard, saving money, and trying to improve himself as a person. He went to therapy to deal with his issues and worked on becoming a better listener and communicator. He even started volunteering at a local women's shelter, hoping to make a positive difference in the world. After several months of hard work, the groom finally worked up the courage to reach out to the bride again. This time, he didn't try to make excuses or blame anyone else for what had happened. He simply apologized from the bottom of his heart and told her that he loved her and their child more than anything in the world. The bride was surprised by the groom's sincerity and genuine remorse. She had expected him to continue making excuses or trying to win her over with empty promises, but instead, he had taken responsibility for his actions and was working hard to be a better person. After much thought, the bride decided to give the groom another chance. They started dating again, taking things slowly and working on rebuilding their trust and communication. It was a long and difficult journey, but eventually they were able to get back together and start their family. Years later, the groom would look back on that fateful day when he had announced that he was leaving the bride for another woman and feel a sense of shame and regret. The wedding was canceled, and everyone went home, their heads filled with gossip and speculation about what had just transpired. As for the bride, she was devastated by what had happened, but she knew that she could not let it get the best of her. She had a child to think about, and she needed to be strong for him. Over the next few months, the bride slowly began to rebuild her life. She got a job, found a new place to live, and focused on her child. But the pain of what had happened never really went away. Every time she thought about her ex-fiancé, her heart would ache, and she would wonder what could have been. Then, one day, the unexpected happened. The bride received a call from her ex-fiancé's new girlfriend. She had found out about the whole situation and was deeply sorry for what had happened. She wanted to meet with the bride and apologize in person. At first, the bride was hesitant, but eventually, she agreed to meet with the new girlfriend. They met at a cafe, and the new girlfriend apologized for what had happened. She explained that she had no idea that the groom was already engaged and that she was just as hurt by what had happened as the bride was. The two women talked for hours, and in the end, they both walked away feeling better. The new girlfriend had cleared the air, and the bride had found a sense of closure. She knew that she could move on with her life, and that the pain of the past was finally behind her. Years later, the bride would look back on that day with a sense of gratitude. She realized that it was the moment when she had finally let go of the pain and hurt and had found a way to move forward. And though she would never forget what had happened, she was finally able to forgive and find happiness once again.